Welcome to Jargon, a podcast bringing clarity to commonly misunderstood business concepts. We're debunking and simplifying the buzzwords and ideas plaguing today's business world and offering a fresh perspective on these topics.
Hello, this is Bill Aimone
and Todd Boutte.
And we're here for another podcast. Todd and I are back, and we're going to talk about ERP selections, selecting new business systems for your company. Part of this is we're going to talk about some of the best practices and how to approach an ERP selection and what are the things to look out for and how to prevent those. Todd, I know you recently just helped a large services company go through the selection process, and they ended up picking a nice cloud-based solution there. But then I think we've worked on some other ones where they picked some other types of solutions. So when we go talk to companies that are looking at new ERP systems, they're always focused on their current pain points, which is good, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what are some of the pitfalls with that?
Well, it's kind of narrow focus generally, and that's why they often need assistance from people like us to kind of drill into those pain points and ask them questions about how did they get there? Did you absorb these pain points from other areas? Are you just living with these and you don't have to be? Do you have a current solution that could take care of these? We spend a lot of time asking these type of questions because people get their blinders on. I can't do this, and that's my whole life, and I hate it. Right? So we like to drill into those areas with them.
Yeah, and typically we find the pain points in one of three areas. One is the system we have is just really hard to maintain, and it's old and customized, and it's really it's become an anchor in the company, and it's gotten old and rusty, and they've patched it up. And that's one pain point, but that's not enough to push someone over the edge in putting a new ERP system in. That's really just saying, hey, it's a pain in the neck to deal with this system because it's old, and we got to get a new one.
Yeah.
But then we also hear the pain points in terms of getting information out of their systems. Maybe they just can't get information about customer performance or receivables or even invoices that are out there that they owe and payments they owe, or even just being able to slice and dice information the way they want to. So they have to do a lot of manual manipulation outside the system.
Right, which adds up to a tremendous amount of time. I mean, in some cases, data is accessible, but if it takes one or two people half a day to get everything together every time you need it, every couple of weeks or every month, you might as well have a full-time set of employees dedicated just to reporting, which is a huge waste of money.
And the other one is just called cycle time. So, and sometimes we talk to our potential clients who are coming to us with, ERP replacement needs or perceived ERP replacement needs. They talk about they can't get the books closed, or it takes a long time to process a purchase order, or put an asset in service, it takes a long time. And so there's cycle time type things, or even get a bill out the door to bill the customer to get them the right information. It takes a long time. So those cycle time improvements they look for. But oftentimes, some of those improvements sometimes aren't enough to really justify a new ERP solution. So really the companies really need to dive in a little deeper and really understand, here are my pain points we have today. Okay, maybe it takes me a couple extra days to do something, whatever it might be, and you add those up. Those don't typically justify unto themselves an ERP replacement. What really justifies it is, how is that the ERP solution you have today going to support the future?
Right.
And where the company's going and new capabilities they want. And I remember, your recent ERP selection you did, they were actually building up capabilities within the company to basically grow. It was an older company, but it was kind of new because there was a new structure they were putting in place, right?
Yeah, exactly. They had some parent company systems in place that helped them get off their feet. But in their case, it was the completely wrong type of system. And I know I'm getting ahead of your list a little bit, but that was the impetus for them. This was an ERP system designed entirely the wrong way for their type of business. And they were making it work, like you said, but it was slow going because of it.
Right. So they had a totally new business model. So really, the big thing about for a company selecting an ERP system is putting that vision down on paper of, where's the company going to go? What are my business assumptions? What's the organization structure we want to look like? So in your case, you were talking about the company taking on parent company responsibilities that they used to have. They're almost like they're a spin-off of a new company. So thinking about, am I going to centralize billing? Am I going to centralize payroll? What roles, what do I let the field do versus corporate do from a structure perspective, and getting that vision down? But another part of that vision is, where's the company going from a integration perspective? Are they going into new markets? Are they going to horizontally or vertically integrate? How are they going to grow? And that impacts other things like, where am I going to operate? Am I going to new countries?
That's right. Big one there, right? All the different tax and currency calculations and things like that. Even state or state to state and different regulations, regulatory bodies. You might have different reporting requirements. Yeah, maybe you're going public in the future, right? There's a number of things there.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting that vision down and getting those decisions down on paper to say that, hey, this is where we're going. This is the ERP that we're looking at, that we're picking where we want to go. It's not any different than picking a new vehicle. Husband and wife go to the dealership and they pick get a Prius. And by the way, they get home and she says, you know what? I think we're going to have 4 kids. Well, they're not fit in the car. They probably should have got a minivan or an SUV instead, right?
Exactly. And so the decisions that they make may have been completely driven by that first list of a couple of pain points, right? They're solving a problem for now versus solving for now plus the future, right?
And then the other piece of it too, for example, manufacturing companies that decide to grow, maybe they're going to build a new manufacturing plant in this part of the country or part of the world. How are they going to build those?
Oh, yeah.
And does that mean they need capabilities around managing construction projects as part of their ERP?
Right. Or taking on their own warehousing rather than be farming that out to a third party. Maybe they're going to add distribution networks to their capabilities instead of, again, leasing or contracting those out in the future. All of those things play into an ERP selection.
Exactly. Or even their channel strategy.
Yes.
We worked with a company a number of years ago when they were looking at ERP. They were totally changing their channel strategy. They were doing a lot of interaction directly with the end consumer, and they decided they're going to primarily work through the distributors, but then build some capabilities around providing more of a digital presence that offers a lot more through their channels to give them more market penetration. But that drove new capabilities that they need for their future ERP system. And had they not thought about that, they probably could have picked the wrong system based upon that, not knowing that we need some digital capabilities to allow us to market and reach a variety of channel partners and provide services for them as well.
Right, or getting aligned with those channel partners now. Like, what is the best system in an industry like that where you might be able to provide direct connections between your channel partners? If you are off on an older system or a very disparate system, you might be losing out on big opportunities to do some direct and fast integrations with your partners.
Exactly. And then you start thinking about accounting practices. I'll call it business rules for the future. We've seen a lot of companies use the ERP system, and one of the constraints they had, they didn't know it, was they wanted to have a different method for doing costing, for example, on their product costing. Yeah. And the old ERP system kind of commanded they do it a certain way. And they found out that, if we have a new ERP system, we want to change our costing methodology. And how do we do our product and service costing and standard costing? How are we going to recognize revenue? All those policies and practices need to be thought about in terms of how do we want to do our accounting and how do we want to manage our controls and that type of thing. It could drive a different ERP answer based upon the product they pick. Because one might be stronger in doing standard costing or manufacturing costing versus moving average costing. And maybe they're a discrete manufacturing company versus a process manufacturing company. Maybe they're treating their process manufacturing like a discrete process, and they need to change it and treat it like a manufacturing process should operate. So using that ERP to provide that kickstart into improving your accounting processes. The point is, as part of that ERP selection, you need to get those decisions nailed down and know what capabilities you want and use that to drive your selection. Don't use just the current state and the current issues as driving your process.
Right. And a few of the things we uncovered in that most recent selection is just that some people had never asked these questions of this business before. And so that puts them in a state of mind where, again, that small or maybe that small list of pain points was just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. And so it's really know when you're going. It's like that car example. I need a new car because our old car is breaking down and it's costing us a lot of money. I need a new car and I bought the Prius. No, you need the minivan instead. And this is where that vision comes into play. But the other part of the equation, though, too, in the selection process is taking a look at other systems. A lot of companies have, for example, they might have on their front end Salesforce that they're using to conduct a lot of transactions with their customers. And in customer engagement, it might be pipeline management and how do I pull in customers and interact with them, considering how does that ERP need to interact with that system and tie in with that system and make it a seamless process. So that's another piece of it.
Absolutely. And then it comes down to deciding what to do with that information. That's one of the follow-ons. But looking at every system that's in use today, is this redundant? Is there a use case for this in the future? Are we going to replace it as part of the ERP? Is it an integration? No, we love Salesforce. We have to have it. These are the types of decisions to make, once you collect that information.
Well, and then you extend over to the shop floor, Todd.
Sure.
I know you've worked with a client recently that had a lot of shop floor technology that they're trying to integrate into their ERP.
Yeah, and that was a mandatory for them, right? This is a list of must-haves. This system that we use now, we are not changing. It needs to work with our ERP system. Okay, great. Let's use that information and build from it. Once you have a happy floor, they don't much care about the corporate accounting. They like how their warehousing is done. They like how it's running, yada, yada, right? So we can take that information and move it up the chain and try to meet in the middle with the corporate accounting requirements. But yeah, those considerations are very important.
So really making sure that the new ERP system can seamlessly integrate with the shop floor systems you already have. So maybe there's some SCADA sitting on top of it that's pulling that data and processing that data that you can use and easily funnel it into a new ERP system, and it fits. It'll work.
Sure, and that often works out somewhere in the neighborhood of some sort of daily consolidations and reporting up to an ERP system, or, often shop floors want things to the minute, to the second, and that's fine. But there might be a compromise there for kind of a daily roll up to a bigger system.
Yeah, and then the other piece of this too is there any data cleanup that needs to be done with these other systems?
Oh yeah, modification in flight. Yeah, bring it into a reporting system that has some consolidations or some costs applied to things like volumes in a manufacturing plant. Yeah, make those data transformations on the way up.
And then the other piece is too, are there other systems that need to be implemented first?
Sequencing, right.
Before, maybe there's a payroll system you've got to put in before you put the new ERP in that gets the employee data in the right format and the processing right before you put the ERP system. So are there any predecessors to that ERP selection process? Because really what we're driving at here is the selection process is not just about picking, but it's also about defining the scope of the project. So are there other systems that need to go in first that might not be part of the ERP system? You start thinking about back end from operations technology. You think about front end from the CRM, customer-facing technology. And then there's things that are internal to the organization like payroll systems or maybe a treasury management system. Maybe you need to get in a common treasury management system first before you start moving to that ERP. So what are some things you got to think about first that will make that ERP project more successful?
Yeah, that's right. We don't often get the experience of helping a company completely start from a blank slate and build everything fresh around one system or maybe two at the most. We're often dealing with 3, 4, or 5, systems at a time, and the sequencing becomes critical. I mean, in the case of payroll especially, right? You never want to tell a client that they have any risk of, missing a payroll cycle or that the timekeeping system in their plant will not work for days or weeks or something like that.
And the other critical piece of the ERP selection is getting the scope down right.
Yeah.
Understanding, okay, I've got the vision that tells me what my new capabilities are. Which part of that vision is going to be a part of the ERP solution? So you might look at that and go, you know what, our product lifecycle management, for example, may not be part of ERP. Maybe it's something later, or it might be something they want to put in part of your ERP system, or maintenance.
Right.
Preventative maintenance tracking, work orders. Is that part of ERP or is it not? And making sure those new capabilities that you want as a company are clearly marked as part of the ERP project so that you get a good scope down. Ultimately, you want to get the right budget because you can go pick something and you can have the software vendors tell you how much they think it's going to cost and they can give you a bid for the software. But the software itself or the subscription is usually a smaller part of the implementation.
Yeah, and kind of 2 takeaways there. I mean, we've often broken implementations down into phases to account for a few of these things. Take a lesser important piece, if there is such a thing, of the software implementation and push it further down the road. Get core accounting set up, get core features set up to minimize risk of trying to implement too many things at a time. So phase your implementation. That's a good way to approach that. Spread your budget out a little bit if you can help it. Move those lesser important modules maybe down the road a little bit. And then in terms of the scope, don't let scope get the better of you, right? That's one of the things we do help guide people on.
Yeah, well, that's part of setting that vision and putting the ring fence around the project. The other piece of the scope is also understanding what's it going to take to implement. And really, there's 2 pieces of that. There's your internal needs and capabilities. So really assessing internally what capabilities do you have your people's knowledge, skills, capacity to be able to support an implementation. And then how do you fill those gaps? Number one. Number two is picking, as part of that ERP selection process, picking who's going to implement. Who's your systems integrator? Who are the people that are going to come in and configure the software, sit alongside your people to configure the software to make sure it works, to build the integrations with the other pieces of software that you have. So who are the technical resources and where are you going to get them from? And a big decision companies make all the time is, do I get them from the software vendor or do I get them from a independent consulting firm? For example, Oracle has internal consultants. They also have partners they work with that are, can implement Oracle, they can implement NetSuite, and that's all they do. They specialize in that. So there's pros and cons to each. Some of the pros on finding an independent person is that's what they do. They specialize. If you've got NetSuite, you find a firm that specializes in NetSuite, they're going to know it backwards and forwards. On the other hand, if you hire the software company to be your integrator, there's a benefit to it where you maybe feel like you have one throat to choke to say, which, sometimes works well, but sometimes some larger software companies, their services arm is a completely different group from their software arm, and they don't really talk to each other, and they really don't have a lot of influence over each other.
And that handoff becomes kind of awkward then, right? You're kind of scoping this project again repeatedly. When you get that handoff, that can be annoying.
Yeah. And so really looking at that and deciding who you're going to use to implement, they should be involved in helping scope the implementation as part of that selection process to then say, oh yeah, this is what it's really going to take, because they're the ones who are going to go implement it. And so making sure you get a good, accurate assessment of what's it going to take to implement from a resource perspective. What are the expectations on your company? So if they don't tell you, hey, we need you to have this many people, this many hours a week, you probably don't have a good scope. So you make sure you have a good plan for your people that you need, or outside resources that you need to help make sure the software implementation is a success. But then also identify who that systems integrator is, because frankly, you're going to be dealing with them more than the software company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in most cases, you're dealing with them for this 6, 9, 12 month the implementation plus some post implementation care period. So your relationship's going to be pretty long. But Bill, how do you coach clients or step in when all you're hearing is sunshine and rainbows from the software vendors and the implementers, right? Because they're just obsessed with trying to make you happy. This implementation's easy. It's going to take 6 months. Your commitment to us is minimal. We're going to do the whole thing.
Yeah, that's part of where we force them to sit down and put a resource plan together to say, what are the expectations, and get that written in the contract from an expectations perspective. And again, this goes back to my comment about if they don't clearly identify the resources needed to do what. So there's that piece of it. The other piece of it too is we typically have like a laundry list of here are all the activities that need to be done on an ERP implementation, and making sure there's clear delineation of who's going to do what. And I'll give you an example. We had a company come in and they did the sunshine and rainbow. Oh, it's going to be inexpensive. And the assumption that the consulting firm, the systems integrator, made was that they were just going to provide coaching and the client was going to do all the configuration. So they played a pure coaching role.
Wow.
And the client didn't really understand that until we stepped in and said, okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. Who's actually going to be loading the chart of accounts into the system and making sure it's right?
Right. Who's pushing buttons?
You are the client. They go, okay, let's talk about how much time it's going to take to clean up the chart of accounts, load it in, for them to learn how to use the software, and then be able to learn how to test it, learn how to train other people. And so the client has to do all that. And they go, wait a minute, we don't have resources to do that. How do we fill that gap? So coming up with a realistic plan, and maybe there's additional resources that need to come in and help them through the process, clean up data, do all the things that need to be done. So we typically will take that laundry list of all the things you've got to do on a project, all the way from cleaning up data to migrating it to integrating it and testing it, and then training people on it, making sure we know who's going to do what. And that's clearly ties to the software integrator's contract. And then you've got a good resource plan down. So we have to sit back and say, wait a minute, you're missing a bunch of stuff here. You're assuming they're going to clean up data. Well, do you know they don't even have this data? So doing that assessment up front is clearly a part of this project of the ERP selection. Point is, it's not just about selecting the software. I mean, I've had people come to me, how quickly can you select an ERP system? And I said, well, you can do it in a day, like just decide, okay, we're going to go with Infor, CSI, or Microsoft Business Central, and make that decision, and then live with it later. Or you can put the right due diligence in place and set the scope, set the vision, and understand where the company's going and incorporate that into a solid, I'll call it model for implementation and a rollout strategy that's going to give you a clear vision of what you want to do. And then alongside that, pick the software alongside those options.
Great.
So that's really the takeaway. In ERP selection, it's not just about picking it. It's more about getting a good vision and scope down and getting executives to line up around it.
Sure. I mean, it's a difference between, like you said, we can go out to lunch and make a decision. Well, it doesn't make it an informed decision, right? Or the right decision.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, exactly. Well, anyway, if you guys are listening, have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or Todd. This is bill@trinergy.com or todd@trinergy.com, and we can talk to you more about this and share more about what we do with our clients in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. Always happy to do so. Thanks, Bill.